I suspect you are all fairly familiar with these things, right? Now, I don't know what it's like in other places in the world, but these things are very popular here. And there are two types. They are either about £1 and they smell like diesel fuel mixed with toilet cleaner, or they smell absolutely divine and they're about 40 quid. There's no in between. But there is if you know how to mix oil and water. What, I hear you say? Oil and water don't mix. Oh yeah, yeah they do. Yeah. The way to get oil and water to mix is to add alcohol. You can use any kind of alcohol. You can use rubbing alcohol or spirits, or the best thing to use actually is really cheap vodka. You know, like the dollar store type vodka, where it tastes like paraffin and it doesn't smell of anything, because that's what you want. You want it to not smell of anything. Now, these are Reed diffusers, and obviously the Reeds only last a certain amount of time. These were both new ones originally. So you can use them 2 or 3 times for the same scents, but once you want to swap scents, then you need to change these. In order to replace these, because you can't buy the Reeds on their own, the easiest thing to do is get bamboo skewers. You know, like you put meat on, like the big cocktail sticks. Bamboo skewers. Snip the pointy ends off the end and pop them in, and that will do the same job. First things first, we're going to need hot water and alcohol. And you're also going to need essential oils. We'll talk about those in a minute. The water doesn't need to be boiling, it just has to be hot. So if you've made yourself a cup of tea and it's about drinkable temperature now, that's about how hot you want it. You don't need it scalding, especially if you're using glass, because the glass will crack if you put too much water in it. So we're going to do half and half of alcohol and water. That will last about a month. I'm going to do both of these at the same time since I've got the pipette out. Ooh. When you make these, you need to make them in smallish quantities, smallish jars. So you don't want anything too big, about half the size of a jam jar. You can use a jam jar, but again, you don't want to put too much in it. The easiest thing to do is buy some of these cheap ones for £1 and wash them out. You need to make sure that the neck of your bottle is small. So if you're using a jam jar, you can, like if you've got the ability to drill or cut a hole in the top, then that's perfect. If not, use a bit of saran wrap or cling film underneath the jar, over the top of the jar, and poke your sticks through it. The good thing about that is if you're using bamboo skewers, you can use the pointy end to poke through. You want as little as possible to evaporate through the top of the jar. What you want is for the oil and water to be forced to travel up the skewers to get out. And once you've got your little bit of oil and water, all you need to do is add some nice smelling stuff to it. If you've got proper essential oils, high grade, you want about 5 drops of each, and I don't use more than 2 because it can be a little bit overwhelming if you use any more than that. If you're just using 1, then you're going to want about 10 to 15 drops, because 1 oil is not going to be as strong as 2. I've got cinnamon, and orange. Now cinnamon is quite overwhelming, so I'm going to put a bit more orange in than cinnamon, and I've got that absolutely everywhere. Your skewers back in. Give it a mix. If you mix it after you put your skewers in, it will mix better because obviously the skewers are then in the water and kind of act as a spoon. So when it goes cloudy like that, your oil and water have mixed and, ooh, that smells nice. So that's orange and cinnamon. Now, if you want, you can also use herbs. Herbs is a little bit of a, you have to kind of gauge your herbs. We have the best herb for this, I've found, or in my opinion, is rosemary. And what you want to do is add about a teaspoon of rosemary, dried rosemary, to your whatever you use to crush stuff up with, and we're going to crush it. It's important to crush it because you want the alcohol to seep into the plant and pull out the fragrance from the inside of the leaves. Plus, it's a lot easier to get it into the bottle if it's crushed. You can tell with rosemary when it's crushed enough because you can smell it. It suddenly gets really strong. So there's my rosemary. By the time it's crushed up, it should be about that much, about half a teaspoon. And use a bit of paper or a bag or something. Pop your herb straight in. I usually do the herb before I put any oil, because if you put oil in first, the oil sticks to here, and even after you've wiped it off, you'll get all the bits stuck from here onto the lid. So I put the dried herbs in first. And what works really nicely with rosemary for a nice clean, fresh scent without being too girly is geranium. This is a slightly bigger bottle and it's got slightly bigger reeds. So I'm actually going to put a little bit more water and alcohol in, just to fill it up to about halfway. Make sure you close your alcohol properly because it evaporates. Your skewers back in. Oh, that smells lovely. Like that. And mix. Now the rosemary smell from this, or whatever dried herbs you put in this, will get stronger over time. It takes a few hours for it to fully seep into the plant and for it to release the smell. But you can smell the rosemary, but it's not very strong. So don't think, oh, I can't smell the rosemary, I'm going to have to add some more. Give it 24 hours. It's like a tincture. In fact, this is exactly how you make a tincture. Not exactly, but it's close enough. But like tinctures, you have to leave them to brew a little bit. Another thing you can do for this is if you've got a nice smelling herbal tea that you really like the smell of, use one of those tea bags, make a cup of tea, but only like about a quarter of the amount of water you would normally put in. Let it cool, add some alcohol to it, add a couple of drops of a nice essential oil. I really like using Earl Grey with a bit of lemon or orange to make Earl Grey or Lady Grey. Bergamot is nice as well because it brings out the smell of what's already in the tea. And then that's it. You've got a new air freshener for a month. Simple as that. What you'll find is that over a little bit of time, it will start to separate. And when it starts to separate, you just give it a swill up, just like I've done just there. And that's it. Ta-da. If it is starting to separate already, which this one is, then you need to add a little bit more alcohol to break down the oil. And you'll see it, you can see it break down. It goes a bit like, you know, like when you drop, if you've got greasy water and you drop dish soap into it and all the grease goes, ah, run away. It's kind of like that. Okay, there you go. I'm gonna, very nice. I'm gonna pop this one outside because it's gonna compete with this one. It'll be a bit too strong. Well, that might be a fun little thing for you to do, since I had to make some anyway. There are some scents that you'll find are far too strong. I love frankincense, but frankincense is way too strong.